So our next questions, we're going to move into a series of traffic related questions. And so I'm going to hand this over to our traffic expert, Bill. So if at grade crossings are being closed, which Millette went through as some of those options, how will the traffic patterns change, Bill? If you could give us a little tutorial on that. And then I've got some site specific questions that will follow up.
Thanks, Eileen, and good evening, everyone. So I put together a little summary here of how we look at traffic when we look at both grade separations and crossing closures. So this is a hypothetical street network, and the dashed red line in the middle is the rail right-of-way. And then you can see, of course, street crossings and then parallel streets to the railroad itself. And right now we're showing all three crossings have about the same amount of traffic in each direction. So then if we go to the next slide. When you close a crossing, what happens is you essentially eliminate all the through traffic. So the amount of traffic that's on the streets adjacent to the closure then is only the traffic that's related to the specific uses that are on that short 1 block segment. And so the traffic on the street itself is reduced dramatically, but that traffic has to go somewhere. So the next slide shows what happens with that. So what occurs is what we call a traffic diversion. And the way we looked at this in our analysis is essentially what I would call the worst case. It's where people, when they're approaching the grade crossing, they wait until the very last intersection to turn to go to another crossing. So you can see with the arrows that people approaching from either side, they're turning either right or left to go to the adjacent crossing. So what happens is that the traffic volumes on the adjacent two crossings go up. But what also happens is that the turning movements at the intersections nearby increase. So you end up with some changes in traffic operations because of this. Now in real life, it won't happen quite this way. It will be more dispersed. Just people, people learn. They learn that the street that they're on does not cross the tracks anymore. So they won't drive on that street if they have an opportunity. They'll shift over to a street that does have a crossing, and they'll do that. Typically, they'll do that earlier rather than later. And so the way we did our analysis, actually, as I said, it's kind of a worst case because it assumes everybody waits till the very last minute to make that decision. And then the other part of this on the next slide is what happens when you have a grade separation. So it's kind of the reverse, is that by grade separating, you actually increase the ability of that crossing to accommodate traffic or increase the throughput. And you also tend to decrease the traffic on the other crossings. And the reason for this is that, for example, right now, between 11 and 12 minutes during the peak hour of traffic on a weekday, the gates are down, the crossing gates are down. And so there's traffic, waiting. And actually the amount of time that traffic is waiting and there's queuing occurring is actually more than 11 or 12 minutes. So if you think about it, you have 60 minutes in an hour, maybe as much as 25% or 20% of it is actually related to the train crossings that are occurring. So when you grade separate, you gain back all that time. And so you can move more cars through the crossing. And also people don't have to experience the delay. It's less delay. So traffic will be attracted to where there's a grade separation. So you have these two different kind of activities occurring when you have either crossing closures or when you grade separate. In our analysis that we did takes both of these into account.
Thanks, Bill. Now I've got a site-specific one, and the question is, what happens to the traffic if you close Broadway and/or Brewster? So if you could get a little bit more site-specific on that one.
Yeah, let's see. What I'm going to do is share my screen. Can I do that? Whoops.
You should be able to. There you go. I see you.
Okay, now I had the virtual room here. Let me get it back.
And Peter can assist if you need to, Bill. Just let us know.
Oh, let's see if this works. Just let me know if you can see the virtual room.
I see the room, but I see you in it, so I'm not seeing it independent of you. So your screen's not really being shared. We're just looking at you.
Oh, that's because
Start the screen share. Sometimes you have to hit start.
Yeah, that would help, wouldn't it? There we go.
There, right. Maybe that'll work.
I need to find it there. Okay. Got it now?
Yes.
Okay. So as Jessica was showing you earlier, the traffic information is over here. And so click on it. Just to give you an idea of what's there, there's existing level of service information that we'll talk about in a second here. There's also information for the year 2045, so a projection of what might happen in the future. And then we also have information on the daily traffic. That's the amount of traffic crossing the tracks at the different locations. And then there's a set of graphics that looks at traffic patterns. Now, if we go to this first one, existing level of service, so there's a diagram here which will help answer this question about what happens when the various different alternatives. So the first one shows traffic in the all at grade situation. That's the existing situation. And we're showing the intersection here of Whipple, and then this is Brewster, and then Broadway. And we're showing traffic level of service, which just to refresh you on what that is all about. It's a ranking or a grading of the traffic conditions, with A being a very good condition, and then F being a very poor congested condition. So right now you can see most of the locations are C or D. This is in the AM is the first letter, and then PM is the second one next to it. So for example, at Arguello and Brewster right now, it's a C in the morning and a C in the afternoon. Right now, the worst location on this map is El Camino at Brewster, which goes to E in the morning and D in the afternoon. And then down below, let's see if I can, yeah, okay. Down below, you can see what happens with the alternative where you grade separate everything. And it has a fairly positive impact, as you might imagine, on traffic. So at the worst location, for example, it goes from an E before to a D in the morning, and then from a D in the afternoon existing to a C. So there's a fairly big improvement if you grade separate everything. Then if you go back here and we look at the option of Whipple and Brewster being grade separated, but closing Broadway. So from my discussion before, you have two different things going on. You're increasing the throughput at these two locations, Whipple and Brewster, but you're decreasing dramatically the throughput at Broadway. And so traffic is going to be diverted to these two locations. But generally, if you compare with the existing here, you can see that generally overall conditions are the same or even a little bit better than existing by doing this. In fact, fairly much improved at the worst location there at Whipple and El Camino. So overall, there would be an improvement in terms of existing conditions. And then the other option would be if you close both Broadway and Brewster, but you grade separated Whipple. Now in this case, it's a little different conclusion because of the traffic being diverted from these two crossings. There's more traffic on Whipple, and you can see the effect that has. It actually goes to level of service F up here at Arguello and E and D at the other location. So there would be a deterioration in traffic conditions on Whipple. And there would also be increased traffic on Jefferson, which is just off the map here. So anyways, that's how that works. And I think that also answers the question about what happens if you close those two streets or if you grade separate.
Yeah, it does. Thank you, Bill.